Hi, Dana. Welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to get you here on this Monday morning. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
All right, great stuff. I'm delighted. Delighted to have you here. One thing I always ask people is always to introduce themselves at the beginning because I always laugh. I always butcher the introductions, so it's better for somebody to speak for themselves than it is for me. So, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I am Dana Canalichio, and I am the Director of Operations for Four Corners Hospitality. We are a hospitality company in the city of Philadelphia. I like to say that we're not really corporate, even though we're pretty big, but it's one owner, no partners. My owner pretty much develops everything, and then I just run it for him. So I've been with FCM for about 15 years now, and we've grown to 15 bars and restaurants. They're all a little different, which makes it really fun and exciting and exhausting all in the same, because we just have all different locations and none of them are alike. We have two nightclubs, one small, one's big. We have two fancier restaurants. One's in the city, one's in the suburbs. We have three Mexican restaurants, two giant outdoor beer garden restaurants, nightclub kind of venues. We have a brewery, and our brewery is a sports bar that hosts families and very kid friendly, and a dog
Yeah,
park, Craft Hall. And then we have our newest one we just opened is Lucy's Sports Bar, and it's a kind of remake. We had a Lucy's in Philadelphia several years ago, and we decided to bring it back, kind of reimagine it, more of a a dive sports bar that
love
opened a
it.
month ago, and it's insane. It's going great. And then there's just a couple pop-up beer gardens. So majority of our locations are year round, but then we have five that are seasonal. So we're getting ready to gear up in April to open up all our seasonal locations.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And it's amazing that you were there for like 15 years. Like that's quite something,
Yeah,
especially with like one owner, like no partners. Like you must have quite a rapport with them.
yeah. You know what? I like to say that I am very thankful and very lucky to be in the position I'm at. It's been really wonderful. It's really good when you work for a very good owner who is very generous and passionate, and enjoys what he does, and he comes to work every day. So he already built that kind of culture, and then working for
Yeah,
him all these years, um, retention is extremely important. So we've done everything we can to retain our staff, and I can tell you a lot of my employees have been with me 7, 8 years. A lot of them return season to season. Also in the off season, we try to keep as many of our good employees and put them in other locations just to keep them employed. We offer a lot of bonuses and extra like tidbits to the staff, and it just really helps with retention.
yeah, and that's great. I mean, you, I never normally jump into retention like straight away.
Yeah.
But here we are. So let's do it.
Yep.
It's interesting. I think one of the things I hear on the doing these episodes is that like, post COVID, we had a real like, oh my God, we need to fill like all of our restaurants again. Like we got to fill, like we don't have people have like left and we don't have them anymore. And then it became a question of like quality. Oh my God, we're getting so many people that don't know really what they're doing, and we need to really like nail the quality part of it. And now the conversation is very much around retention and how we think about keeping staff. But it's interesting that you mentioned that like you've had staff that have been with you for years and years and years. And so I guess, that speaks to a lot of the culture. I mean, it's not just bonuses that keep people there, as you mentioned, you know what I mean? There must be something else there. So you want to like speak to a bit of the culture part first, like what it's like at FCM and how you kind of think about like retention?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have so many different locations. So, when it comes to like management, I always joke and I say that I just play Tetris every day with my management team because we have different locations that I like to find what manager and personality fits what location and what's best for them. So if they're a good manager, but it's not really working out in one location because it's just a different vibe and feel, I move them around and put them in the right place. And then that, again, retention is important. So that gets them to stay longer because they may not have been not happy working in the nightclub, working till 4 a.m. But then I could put them over to the brewery, which closes at midnight every day. It's like little things like that. And then with the majority of our other staff, just front of the house and back of the house culture. Again, listen, we're all in the business to enjoy what we do, right? We do it because we want to have fun. We want to enjoy our jobs and work. And, we provide fun places for people and social places for people. So as long as we're having fun and being sociable in these places, we know that the guests are going to come and enjoy themselves and everybody's happy, right? Like
Yeah,
everyone's
no,
working,
totally.
making money, everybody's enjoying being where they're at. So it was always just, providing the environment for everyone, good or bad. It's just a fun thing. And that's what it is. Like, that's right. We always got into the bar business because it was fun and it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
But, and going through the pandemic, which was obviously very challenging for everybody. We were very fortunate. We already had so many outdoor locations that it was almost very easy to be open during the pandemic because
yeah,
we're already outside. We were already practicing a lot of those rules that we had to follow. And then and we just had to twist and turn everything to make it work. So we were very fortunate that we were able to get through the pandemic. And then there was the struggle afterwards, just, yes, to find staff. Staffing was very far and in between. I find now, several years now past, it's people are applying and we're finding staff. Quality might not be as great. A lot of people that are getting into the business are very green. They haven't done it before. They haven't been in it. They're not as dedicated because they just don't know. They're
yeah,
just, right now they're looking for a job. People are looking for jobs. So let me go try to serve and bartend. And they just don't have the experience. So that's what I'm finding now is we're getting a lot of people that want to get into it, but they don't know they don't know how. So we're training.
yeah,
Where before it was always, we were fortunate that we had a lot of very popular places in Philadelphia. So you would come and try to get a job, and it was like, I was just picking the best of the best. And
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
right? And now I'm sitting here and finding what we can and training them to become the best of the best.
It's interesting you say that because I think, one of the things I hear from people, especially when they talk about retention, is like what are sort of the key strategies or things that people are doing to retain staff. And it seems that like training and on-site training is a very important part of that as well. It sounds like you've kind of had to like bring that sort of process, like almost put it on steroids because the quality of people is not quite there.
Right. Yeah. And again, training for us with a lot of the seasonal places is like, listen, we're open for 6 months. We need to get in, make as much money as we can, do as much business as we can, and get out. So for me, it was always there's not really a lot of time to train. Like you need to get in
Yeah,
and know what you're doing, and then it was also easier when you're putting people right in and you're kind of just throwing them to the wolves. They either
yeah,
have they either have it or they don't, right? And you're either going to get it and you're going to thrive in it, or it's not for you. And we say this business isn't for everyone. It's a very hard, grueling business per se. And, it's either you have it or you don't. And what we found now, especially in today's environment, it's a hard job. People are not very nice and people aren't friendly anymore. And so now you're sitting here training them to do the job, but then also training them how to deal with today's customers, which is a whole
interesting.
other podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the only. Let me tell you that has alluded to that on this podcast. It's interesting you talked about like, like people are particularly green, they might not be as dedicated because they don't know that people are looking for jobs, not necessarily looking for like hospitality jobs, but they see yours as a job. What do you look for when you look for like great, like kind of front of house, back of house? Like I always use the phrase is like it's hard to describe, but you know when you see it. But like, what do you look for? Because I feel like service can be taught. That's something I've definitely learned from
Right.
doing this
Right.
podcast. Like you can teach someone a POS, you can teach somebody how to like set a table, but what makes them great?
No, you're right. And I always used to say too, it's like anyone can make a drink and be, but to make a really good bartender, a lot of it's personality, right? You want to come in and you want to enjoy your job. So you're smiling on every day, you're talking to your guests. So a lot of it, I think, is personality, and being able to talk, and give the experience that the guest is looking for. Like you said, anyone can bring in something into a POS. You can teach that, but you can't teach how to be nice. You can't teach how to be kind.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a lot of it. It's all just, putting the personality in the right place.
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like you kind of have an ability for that in the sense, like you were saying, if somebody doesn't want to work in a nightclub till 4 a.m., you can move them to the brewery. And if they don't want to do the brewery, you can move them to one of the other sort of locations, which again is a great kind of benefit. I mean, how many staff is there? I mean, if you've got 15 locations, you must have a couple
So
of,
in full force with the seasonal places open, we have 650 employees.
wow.
Yeah,
That is an insane amount of people to like have to like manage,
it is. It's pretty crazy, but no, what is good is, we do a strong GM model. So I have GMs at every location, and we let them run their show. So I let them do the hiring and the training and run their location, how they like. I don't like to micromanage, but I'm there for support. So
Yeah.
I do meet with my management team at each location every week to just be like, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? Or let them know, well, here's your numbers, here's your labor numbers, or let's fix this. We need to do this. But again, how can I help you? But that's kind of, and I'm very fortunate. I do have some really strong management teams in place. Again, so most of them have been here for a very long time. I've been in the process of hiring some new management now, only because we just opened 2 new locations in 2 months. And usually I hire within. I always like to promote within. That's what we always start with, and train up and let them, go through the company and work their way up. But we've kind of moved so fast that I ran out of options, and now I have to like hire from the outside world, which is not a bad thing to have. But we're, you know, promoting within is definitely something too that helps with retention. You really put your time in, and I invest in my employees
Yeah.
to build them and make them better. That's what we do. So that's been, a good thing with helping with retention too. Like there's a goal for everyone, and a lot of the employees might be here just because they're putting themselves through college, or it's a summer job. But there are some that, really do enjoy it, and they want to expand and work their way through and stay in the business. So,
Yeah, I think, and that's a great insight because I feel like, anyone who comes on this podcast is successful. That's the point of the podcast. And I hear that from people that like, one of the post-COVID kind of real kind of evolutionary or revolutionary, depends on who you ask,
right,
kind
right,
of sentiments towards employees is being able to offer them a career path if they want it. Like to your point, if they're seasonal staff or people see it as a college job, that's all well and good. But there are lots of people who would like to see this as a sort of career. And I think before COVID, the general vibe was, there wasn't necessarily in lots of places, lots of sort of like designed career paths. But I think the pressure of being able to like retain staff is so great now that to be able to formalize the process like a pathway for people if they want to get it is like super important. And I imagine the reason why you were saying that you had to hire external GMs, and this is just my take, so correct me if I'm wrong, just from what I hear, is that I think post COVID, there's a whole generation of people that were not working in the sense that, like, say 2020, 21, 20 into 22, that basically didn't have enough experience to graduate into managerial ranks today, which is like the end of 2023, 2024. And so lots of companies don't have those bodies that were there, that were trained up in the way. And so you're not alone in this, in the sense that like lots of places now have to hire externals where the goal is obviously to groom and train internally to have people promoted to these places. But like you said, I mean, you just opened 2 locations. You've got another seasonal place opening shortly. Like, where's the staff going to come from if,
Right.
like, we're just restarting from like zero,
Right,
Um,
exactly. We're going to have, it's all, again, it's just the after effects of the pandemic that are still rolling along. And even though it's, a couple of years later, here we are, like, and that's it. And that's a little bit of the struggle is, we had to start over, but then we'll be good, in a couple more years. So,
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, building your pipeline internally of like quality candidates and identifying that kind of talent. So that
right.
leads me to my question for you, which is like, in terms of identifying talent, like what do you think makes a great GM?
So again, this business isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
So if you're a lifer or if you're not, right? And obviously GM level, you're a lifer at this point. This is what you chose to do as your career, and this is what you're probably going to do for the rest of your career. And you got to enjoy it. So being a leader again, you, when you're a GM, you have a lot of staff under you, and a lot of the staff is young, right? You're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year olds. And a lot of GMs have been in the business for a very long time, and you're dealing with different age groups. So you're like a mom or a dad, right? And or a babysitter, but they want to look up to you. You want to teach them the respect of what supervisors are and what managers are, and it's a little hard with the younger generation now. So it's very difficult to be a general manager in these days because there is not a lot of respect there anymore. So that's one thing, is teaching the respect and figuring out how to train the new kids coming in. I call them kids.
So do I.
Yeah, because they were went through going through the pandemic and stuff. They've just that's also a lot with social media too, right? Like, we didn't have all the social media 20 years ago. And the people that are in most GM's locations are now, we're growing up 20 years ago and in the
Yeah.
business, so different now. So I when I'm interviewing GMs now looking to hire, a lot of my questions are regarding around how do you deal with the younger generation, and the just the thought process, because it's very different from when it was in the past,
Okay, so that's a good question. That's good. So like this is fertile ground for conversation. Yes, so Gen Z or whatever we want to call them, people who are kind of coming into the workforce after high school and potentially looking to come into these roles. When you ask the GM like how do they deal with them, like, what are you seeing in that sort of behavior? You mentioned respect, for example, what do you mean by things that like you see as a pattern of that sort of generation, and how do you try to mitigate against them?
well, so the younger generation doesn't like to be told no, right? So as a manager, we're telling them, no, you can't do this, no, you shouldn't do that, get off your phone, you shouldn't be on the phone, you shouldn't be eating behind the bar, like, all the basics that are just policies and procedures that they don't feel like they have to follow or do, like that little sense of entitlement, and they don't want to be told what to do. So that's really, that generation now is just learning how to deal with that, to
Yeah.
make them understand that, well, these are the rules and you do have to follow the rules. Like, this is how it is, because
Who
this is how
knew?
operations work. And, and this is what makes the venue that you're working in safe. And there's rules and policies, procedures to keep it safe for the employee, to keep it safe for the guest, and keeping operations moving along so everyone gets the expectation of why they're there. So I want a good meal, I want good food. Well, these are rules you follow, so there's good food being put out on the table, or the environment, and with the music, or again, a good drink. So there's rules, policies, procedures that
Yeah.
you follow to make sure that this is all happening. keeps everything rolling along, makes it all easy. And, but a lot of times they don't want to follow the rules. So,
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily just like a hospitality thing as well. I think it's like across the board, and I sympathize a lot, but also like, I mean, it's a reality check for the workforce. Do you know what I mean? And I think like, people forget that like hospitality was frontline during COVID. You guys were all there as well, and almost like scarred from that experience as well. Like,
yeah, I still get a twitch.
yeah, there you go. You had a
Yeah.
mention of it. And so it's like one of these interesting ones I think about because it's like, this sort of generational gap and like what that can kind of do to hospitality. But on the inverse as well, there's probably lots of positives. Like one of the things like, the kind of overarching sort of things I hear from like a post-COVID employee is like, demand for better benefits, demand for flexibility, demand like it's almost like give and receive kind of sort of relationship now, whereas like probably prior to the pandemic it was very much more dictated by the sort of like managerial staff, like what was happening in the restaurant where without really any sort of question. And I think we have seen a leap in terms of like what sort of frontline staff in hospitality can expect to receive, because now it's very competitive. So you have lots of different restaurant groups not just competing with other restaurants, but competing with other businesses that can offer. And I'm not just necessarily speaking for like DoorDash or Rates or whichever, but like there's plenty of opportunity besides the restaurant itself. So everybody's had to like, the rising tide is lifting all the boats, so to speak. So it's kind of like, I guess if you can find those diamonds in the rough,
Right.
It stands to reason that you have a more proactive type of employee as well. So like, kind of happier one as well, that is happy to want to work there in the first place.
Right. I'll tell you, like, FCM's been doing a guaranteed wage for years and years, even before the pandemic. So we offer minimum $15 an hour for all our staff. Which means, so if you're a bartender and you work, you have a not so good night, we're guaranteeing that you'll at least make minimum $15 an hour, which is not the wage in Philadelphia yet. I know they're fighting to get that wage here, but it's not, but we've been doing it anyway. So, you have a slow night as a server or bartender, that makes $2.83 an hour plus tips. That you're still going to walk with $15 an hour. So you still make it worth your time to be there. And we've been doing that for years. But I know a lot of restaurants and groups are starting to do that now too. So it's a reassurance that, you are going to at least walk with something.
Totally. But I guess the inverse of that is that you can't just compete on wage anymore. You know what I mean? That like you're competing on like the actual experience of being in there, which is kind of like, say, for example, what tech has been talking about for like 10, 15 years, which is like, you're competing on the employee experience, as much as you're competing on like just like a pure base salary. Which I think is an interesting kind of move for hospitality groups, because the margin is quite interesting in the sense that like, you can't just keep competing on price. So the question is like, how do you improve that experience without blowing up the margin? So
right, which is hard. It's hard because some places do it, and then that makes it challenging for all the other locations, right?
Totally.
So we've seen that, especially with more like back of the house staff with line cooks and prep cooks. It's like money talks, and but even if you're offering them a better wage, it could any day now someone else could offer an even better one, and they'll just go. It's very difficult.
Oh, do you see that even with the GMs?
Not with the GMs, no, more back of the house. But not with the GMs, because again, it's also it's not always about money. Like you're saying, it's definitely about the experience. Work-life balance is huge with general managers or all my management team. I would say, back in the day, we would work 15-hour days and not blink an eye and not think about it, and work an 80-hour work week. And now that's just, that's not feasible. So we make sure everyone is, working 8 to 10 hour shifts. You have enough management team on, so they're all not working those extra hours. And then, you're working a 40 to 50-hour work week. It's not what it used to be. Definitely not putting in 80 hours anymore, because it's important to have family work balance and be able, you work hard to make money to enjoy life. And, So if you're working all the time, then what are you enjoying? As long as you enjoy your job, that's good. But you know, you still want to be able to enjoy things outside of your work.
Totally. And I think we're past the era of like the triple shift now, for
Yeah,
staff. And it's, how do we design flexible schedules? How do we like, mitigate against people not showing up, that kind of thing, which I think we're kind of past that in the post-COVID version of it now. But it's like, I mean, to ask me to do triple shift on the floor is obviously just like not a productive sort of environment for anybody to kind of really have as well, So it's like
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's something that you just can't do anymore, and
Yeah.
it's okay. But that's why
That's,
you have your managers, you train them all up enough that everyone can handle their own, and the wheels keep turning, right? I
yeah.
like to say, I like to get all my business, all the restaurants, just on autopilot, and then the management team's there to just put out fires, and as
Um,
long as you have a strong team, then everything flows the way you need it to be, and you're just putting out fires. So
Totally. There's an article I'll send you afterwards. I think I've referenced it in a bunch of these in these podcasts now. It's called Giving Away Your Legos and Other Startup Commandments. And it's basically the idea that like your job spec that you're hired for, especially as the business grows and the demands of the business grow, means your job is obviously going to change. What's expected of you is not necessarily the job spec. It's like what's really expected is like your flexibility. You want
right,
people who can like operate in a type of environment where different questions and challenges will present themselves and people are willing to take those challenges on outside of their dictated job spec.
right,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah,
And I think about that a lot in the sense that article was written about tech companies, and in the sense like I obviously work in tech, but it's funny that like I feel like every time I do this podcast, that's
it
exactly the
comes
sort
right
of
back
person
to
I
it, right?
want. It comes back
Yeah,
to it. And I think it's a human nature thing where you want people who can rise to challenges, who can like take on challenges, open to fail at them, but like the fact that they're willing to take them on is something that you want out of people. And I think especially in a sort of post-COVID environment where, there's not as many people around. So the people you bring in need to be able to take on more challenges if they present themselves in a sort of healthy way.
right, right.
And it sounds like you definitely have kind of the managerial style that you have and the people that you have like below you very much kind of fall into that kind of, operational duty, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much, like just make decisions. And if it's wrong or right, we'll figure it out. But like, it could be instantly, you have to make a decision right there and then. And, based off your experience and what make a decision. And again, if it's right, we move on. And if it's wrong, we'll address it and see how we'll handle that situation next time. But the situations are different every day. Like you never
Yeah,
run into the same problem twice. Every day different. Every guest is different. Every problem, is always challenging, and that kind of makes it fun, though, right? It's like
yeah,
it brings out the energy of trying to solve a problem every day. Sometimes it's exhausting, but for the most part, that's what a manager is there for, is to kind of just solve things as they happen and what needs to happen to keep on trucking along.
totally. Well, look at this. We've flown by 30 minutes already. Can you believe that?
That was
It's
quick, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. One of the questions I ask everybody at the end of the podcast is an extremely vague question, and so I'm curious your take, which is like, what advice would you give people listening to this podcast?
Oh, geez. I don't know. Like, I mean, we were talking earlier. It's just taking advice from everyone that you've been talking to and just hearing the different stories. I feel like we're all going through the same thing, and even before pandemic, just in general, being in this environment, we just deal with the same issues and the same problems, and then the same enjoyment. So I just think now in 2024, learning just how to deal with the new climate that we're in, that everybody is not as kind as they used to be. So just trying to lift each other up and support each other to get through the daily trials every day of dealing with not very nice guests and customers.
Right, lovely way to finish it. All right, Dana, kind of what's for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Cool. It was, thanks for having me on. This was nice, fun.